Good afternoon, everyone from Brazil. It's a good night for those who are in Europe, in other places. It's a great pleasure to be right here with you, taking part of this forum, which is such important, which has had so much diffusion, and especially in this moment where we are living a social and economic crisis, a whole pandemic and a crisis of different paradigms with a lot of social, economic consequences, which are being devastating for the society. My name is Leandro Moraes. I'm a professor of the University of the State of São Paulo, and it's an honor for me to be moderating this roundtable, such an important one and so interesting. So I really want to thank for this opportunity and for your trust to all the organizations, especially the EILO, which is also proposing the topic for today's roundtable. Our session, it's called Social Innovation, Local Communities, and Inclusive and Sustainable Development. The community-based businesses, the future of work, local economic development, and green economy. And truly, these topics are so important to reflect in this century when we think about and when we need to start actions for structural changes as well as conjunctural changes in the reality we are having now. From the point of view of technology, production, and industrial sectors, one of the most important transformations of the productive and consumption pattern with technology, with Industry 4.0. But on the other hand, we have a lot of inequality, a lot of concentration in agendas, and for that it's necessary. With the crisis affecting most countries, we need to think about a transformative agenda, going for a development model centered around people and the planet. To change, we need to transform. And here is where social economy is key to bring answers to the new challenges that we have and that the current situation is facing us with in terms of production models and consumption models that need to be more inclusive and sustainable and treat people as an important part of the process. So today, in this table, in this session, we have as a goal to show how local economic development driving changes in institutional relations at the territorial level can promote social innovation through community enterprises, which make development, territorial economic development, in fact. And that is also a very important topic to think about implementation means of the SDGs, of the 2030 agenda, which has, of course, social, economic, and environmental objectives. So in today's session, I'm right here, Leandro Moraes. We have Marcelo Carrasco, President of the National Association of Councilors for Regional Governments of Chile. He has a wide experience in regional development as a councilor of the regional government and other positions as well. We also have Francisco Javier Jiménez Navarro, which is the manager of the public company Básica in the municipalities of the Sierra of the CADIZ Commonwealth. He has wide experience in public services management in municipalities within Commonwealth, and since 2012, he is the manager of the public company Basic Sau, in charge of waste management in the municipalities of the Sierra de Cádiz Commonwealth. We also will have with us Maximiliano Alonso, the director and Argentinian representative of the Central American Bank for Economic Integration. Maximiliano has a BA and an MA in Direction and Management from the Public Center of Financial Studies of Spain. He has a master's degree in Public Management in the University of Brussels, and then he also had a PhD in Economy. He has published different publications in many international journals, and he has held different positions as a member of the Mexican Associations for International Education. He has also been a member of the board of the Social Responsibility Observatory. We also have Emilio Ceballos Vallejos from Flaxo, who will be here with us in this participation, and also Francisco Albuquerque, who is the coordinator of the Scientific Committee of the Territorial Development Network for Latin America. He was born in Córdoba in 1944. He is an instructor in economy and public policy development. He has been a UN official in the headquarters of the CEPAL in Santiago de Chile, and he's also a university professor and scientific researcher of the Scientific Research Superior Council in Spain. The methodology we have proposed to develop this session, after this initial introduction that I am in charge of about the session topic, about the themes that we are going to address, we also have 8 minutes for each of the speakers in a stimulating and pragmatic way during this time. Afterwards, and after the presentations, I will have some minutes to give you a feedback and generate a systematization of the presentations, thinking about some questions for debate, which we will be carrying out later in some minutes, in about 25 minutes, so as to have a debate with the public, with the audience, through questions that you can place in the chat to the different speakers and participants. And then we will have just 5 minutes for the final closing of our session. So, as you might understand, look at and see, we have an important opportunity before us to address these topics and to discuss in a collective way, taking advantage of this important moment that the forum is proposing us with. And of course, now I would like to give the floor to the first speaker, Marcelo Carrasco.
¿No estás, Marcelo?
Are you there, Marcelo? I'm here. Can you listen to me? Thank you. Hello. I'm here. I'm from Araucanía, from Chile. It's a pleasure to share with each one of you. I would like to show you a presentation that is connected to social innovation and productive development. Let's see if we can show it. We have sent the presentation. Let's see if we can share it on the screen. For all the people that are connected in this forum, I'm going to talk about a general topic connected to the social innovation. First, to generate a concept that has to do with our migration in our country. A 9.5% of our population in Chile belongs to a native group, and in our region, in Araucanía, 3.5% belongs to a native group. It's a 0.5% and a 4.5% in Araucanía. From the total of the population in Araucanía region, I'm going to talk about this region, which is located in the south of the local. We have 990,000 inhabitants, and 68,000 people do not belong to a specific ethnia in our country. The people who do belong to our region group is 330, which is a 33% of the population, 0.9% of the total population, which are the groups that are more in danger in our country. The average of people entering our town that live in the rural areas, which also are part of our originary region, the average of people entering of a person that does not belong to an originary town, which is 385. It's $427 approximately, and the people who present to our originary place is the 59% Chilean pesos. That you will see what the income is lower. Especially, it is below the average, which is 268 pesos, which is $367. The poverty level that is acquired in our originary town from people that do not belong to the originary towns with a lot of poverty, it is a 92%. People that are that have a level of poverty, they reach a 7.7%. The poor people.
So in the case of extreme poverty, 94.54%, and those belonging to native populations, it's a 18.44% of the population. I'm sorry about the slide. So, to sum up, the poorest populations in our country, in Chile, it's people who are from original native populations. In 1989, Marcelo, can you hear me? What I want to say is that this is not a political subject, but it has to do with innovation, social innovation, and productive development. In 1989, once we recovered democracy, the subject of native populations in the community, the non-imperial community, I don't want to start a political debate, but in that year, we reached an agreement, a law was implemented. I won't refer to that either, to that law, but from there, starting from that point, an indigenous development corporation was created as a government agency to start working with native populations of our country, which have their own culture, traditions, customs, and have ancestral authorities. And from that, we were able to generate an institution for the development of indigenous populations as a product of last century's actions. One of the greatest demands that our people have, which has to do with ownership of land, was addressed through the different agreements made with the government. One of these started a process of recovery of ancestral lands which had been taken by the state and by other organisms of the state. I won't go deeply into that subject, but from this, what has been invested by these corporations for indigenous development, we have invested more than $670 million at national level, and in the case of Araucanía, more than $500 in order to give back this ownership of land to indigenous communities. We have now 870 indigenous different populations, both in Program 20A and 20B. In acquisitions for lands, we have acquired more than 200 hectares for these people, and we have also delivered more than 5,000 hectares to different indigenous populations. The problem with this is that when helping indigenous populations that have a very low productive output, these lands are given to the population, but they are not exploited afterwards. So even if they develop different activities of traditional agriculture, livestock, and these people still will be the poorer of our population because they have merely a survival economy. When acquiring these lands by different public policies to give back ownership of the land, there was no technical assistance, no employment, no productive habilitation or housings. It was just a land program that was carried out from a political point of view, but it's a complete failure from an economical point of view. The exporting matrix of Chile represents $29,000 million. And the fruit industry for exports represents more than $6,300,000. So there has been an important increase in agricultural activity for the fruit market, which became one of the most important income sources for our country. Here we have an issue that has to do with human capital. 1 hectare of fruit crops generates 32 workdays for men a year. And for wheat, it's only 4 workdays. So these companies are generating companies. There's a high demand for its products, and they are about to be the second largest exporter in Chile. But there's still lack of lands, lack of water, and lack of human capital. So we can use this in order as an opportunity to close the gap with indigenous lands. We can incorporate them in purchasing processes, in fruit exportations, because they also have availability of water and human capital. How can we do this in the region of Araucanía? Leaving politics aside. And we use this as an opportunity where economical groups, the most important in Chile, actually related with the fruit industry, aided us because as we were not able to acquire more land and required still a lot of water and human capital, we could create this association for use best practices and better development strategies for the land. In the case of Araucanía, we were able to share association and create a partnership with an indigenous organization. And there's also an experience as regards production that we were able to exploit for wine crops. We were able to create high-quality wines with indigenous populations. We were able also to create exporting and make agreement with exporting companies. And we were able to prospect at least 50 hectares of fruit land. This was a pilot plant carried out with big exporters and the inhabitants of our territory in Araucanía, which is the poorest of all, and has also a very precarious system of work. And with the aid of the state and government, we were able to bring this pilot project ahead in order to create sustainable economy and also clean economy in this region where indigenous people were also able to be part and participate in local development. These actions were helped strengthen peasant cooperatives, create programs to train municipal and agricultural officials. We were able to study the potential for food crops in our country and also to make studies of the land and to train our students. There's something that we always say is that we always are doing the same things, so results will be exactly the same. But we are centralized in Chile, and this centralism is not allowing us to interact with the innovation in the regions. We want to be a part of the solution. We want to be a part of the generation of opportunities within our territory. We cannot be in the margins and not help people who have less income, and while having the land that is perfect to generate this income. So we can take the goodwill of the private sector and other public spaces to generate social innovation and productive development with the most vulnerable sectors of our country. Thank you very much.
Very much, Marcelo Carrasco, for your interesting presentation on your experience on social innovation. Then we can give some comments and insights about this. I would like the speakers to take into account the time allotted so that everybody can speak according to what we have planned. And also, please, if you can speak slower, because we are having some interpreters that need to render the message. Thank you very much. Okay, to continue, I would like to ask Javier Jimenez so we can listen to him. Welcome, Javier. Thank you. I will share my presentation. Let's see if I can do it. I will choose a recorded presentation so I can use the allotted time, otherwise it would be complicated. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity for talk a little bit about our experience in the area of CADIZ. This is a wonderful place. It's known by our roots. In 2092, the Olympics time in Barcelona time, and I started working at a company that was in the public sector, and we were requested to work in a national park. So we started working on this, in that plant. That plant never worked. Something was not done properly, but that trip allowed me to fall in love with two things. One, with my woman, who has been my wife for 25 years, and also of this town, this beautiful place. It has 2 natural parks. It has 117,000 inhabitants, and it has 19 municipalities. I cannot share with you what it feels like walking in the squares. If I could, I would. This town is so beautiful, spectacular, magical. It provides joy, beauty, amazing beauty, nature, as beautiful landscape. And within this environment, we can understand why we carry out such a project in this environment. This is how our circular economy project started in CADIZ, which has funds from the European sector, and it was done together with Junta Andalucía. What are our objectives with this project? Mainly to preserve our environment, to look after of this, to take care of the ecological value, to increase the resources from this place, to create the green ecology, to provide employability, and also a correct administration as regards waste management. This is an example about waste management and a new waste picking system, so as to use wells the less possible. And the characteristic of our population, this has been done door by door. We have containers in front of the door, and 3 days a week we recollect the organic waste, and then another day cartons, another day napkins or any other objects. Apart from this, what it has to do with the electronic devices, clothes, oils, or construction waste or demolition products. We also have a system so as to recollect them so it can be reused or to be restored or to reevaluate. All of this leads to some type of investment as regards of doing it door by door. The containers that are offered to each citizen, which are 2, one for the organic objects and the other is for the rest. And then we have adequate installations so that we can carry out this recollection way of waste. This new model, this new transportation strategy is going to be included in our place. We will have treatment plants. We will also have separation plants so as to save on the transportation, and especially to have the possibility of value these fractions within the place. So we will use all the products, we will reduce them, and we also have to consider the different types of regulations that before they were selective. That disappears, so there will be one picking, and we use that time and that transportation as well. We have a new treatment model, which is the organic fraction that has a 40% in pesos of all the waste that is being generated at domestic level. And this organic fraction is going to be treated in 4 levels. The first level is in a domestic level in which the housing that fulfills certain requisites, that has gardens and can use compost, then they will have a device, and they will also receive some training courses, and we will do some follow-up so that they can generate their own compost, and in that way they can treat their organic fraction. The following level will be a community level that implies treating the different neighborhoods or places at maximum 200 inhabitants at the maximum. And then we can move on to a municipality compost at a population level with automatic machines, as you can see in the picture. And this machine has a capacity to treat municipalities or populations within 1,000 and 5,000 inhabitants. We will install 5 machines like this, and it will cover 9 populations, 9 different types of populations, because they are located further away. And then another machine to treat organic products, especially for bigger populations. This has a capacity of 15,000 tons. And then we have to interact with the citizens. It will be a challenge. We will put this challenge to the cities so that they can separate all the waste. That means a lot of action, training, accompanying plan. After the door-by-door system has been installed, we need to do some follow-ups. We've done some surveys. What percentage of the population accepted this new system, this new model? And it had a 94% participation and acceptance of the new system. And I would also like to mention a new classification model that is a model that the citizen can pay more, and the citizen that manages the waste will pay less. As you can see, we will have all the data collected. We will have enough elements to propose this type of classification of waste. And with a short time, I hope I was able to transmit, at least visually, what our place is like, why we have done this project. It's important why we are working on this project, especially in a place like ours. We're getting spectacular results as regards separation of waste. And I would like to thank to Andalusia to make this project possible. And for us, we are very proud to demonstrate a sustainable future as regards waste management is possible. Thank you very much. I thank all of you. Thank you very much, Javier, for sharing and for the recording that you have provided to us and the time allotted that you have followed. Thank you very much. Let's start now with Maximiliano Alonso. The floor is yours. Let me share the screen. Please let me know whether you can see it. Can you see it? Can you see my screen? Perfect. I would like to thank you for the invitation, Jorge, and also to the mayor. It's a pleasure for me to be here. I am from Córdoba. I am with Brussels. So I have been working in the development area for many years, in the economic development area, and now in the bank. The presentation is connected to a more macro level, but has importance in matters of development. With the multilateral bank, we work on these development projects. The presentation is called "The Challenges on the Multilateral Bank for the New Development Models in the New Normality Framework." Let's see. We are always listening to new development models, discourse. But what does this mean? What do we mean by new development models? It means that we are recognizing that the previous models did not work in a correct way, and that we are looking for something new that is better than the previous models, that is aligned with the environment, that is aligned with the progressive and sustainable growth that supports sustainability, the new paradigms, etc., and so on, to generate a better quality of life. However, and then I will refer to the topic I want to talk about, we need also the financing system, the support from that. the development model needs the financing system, especially from the multilateral, in this case, the multilateral bank, which is one of the places in Latin America that invests more in the positioning of development on all the regions. For example, our bank invests approximately 5,000 or 6,000 US in development politics. In Central America, we invest the 52%. We invest them more than CAF and the World Bank in Central America. Having said this, what we propose, or what I propose as to be debated in these changes for the multilateral bank is something that we have seen already, we have already seen, and it's something that is happening right now, but it has been taking place for a long time. For a new development model, we don't need an old multilateral financing. We must improve the ways, and I propose 3 central points. One, the transformation from the reactive to proactive from the multilateral bank. And the second point, a transformation of the linkage between the banks towards a structural coordination. And then, in third place, from competence to a complementary model. In the first case, from reactive to proactive, what we mean by this is the following. How does a multilateral bank works? Credits to countries that say, okay, we need money for this or this other thing. So we are reacting a request that is a domestic request for local projects or provincial projects. I'm going to provide you an example so you can understand this better. What did we do with this pandemic? We reacted. I will based on the 3 components. In Central America, every year, Central America is the most impacted part of the climate impact. It has been the most impacted. Last year, there were 3 hurricanes, 2 or 3 approximately, and they destroyed most of Central America. What did the multilateral bank do? After this, the countries request some funds, bank provides funds for infrastructure, and every year the same happens over and over. So what do? We react towards problems. What we say is that if in the last 10 years we have had these problems, we can matrix this, we can invest and we can project over time so as to save time, to be more efficient, and so on. The second step, I will be brief because we only have 8 minutes, from the linkage to the structural coordination. We will take the same example. The multilateral banks, we do have, we are connected among the multilateral banks. For example, what is happening in Central America, I will refer to that. We have hurricanes happening. We are requested to provide funds. We give the funds. We talk among each other. We say, okay, we decide what we are going to do and what we are going to provide. And we are joined together. But regularly, during international, we work in a structural way. But what I say that we can do is to communicate in a structural way. If we know there are certain structural problems in certain regions or problems that are going to happen in regions, we have to generate debate sectors and to structure those debates, not in the short term, but to project them in the future sceneries. And the third place is competence. To a complementary model, if we take the same example, we have exactly the same problem. Certain banks are more competitive than others. For example, what happens in Central America with our bank is very strong in creating infrastructures oriented to environment. The 45% of the investments that we do in the bank have an environmental component. We have to arrive to the 55%. Other banks, multilateral banks, have other competencies which are better than ours, but they don't put that into play. We cannot complement each of our capacities because there is a cultural matrix and also a development matrix that is very individualist, and there is a lot of competence. We have to go towards a complementary process, but for that, we need the two previous things that I mentioned present to change from a reactive to a proactive model and to link each other towards a structural coordination in order to generate more sustainability in the areas, in important areas. And to finish, I only have 1 minute. A very important topic is the one that we usually use, which is the ODS. But I would like you to think about this better, to the SDGs, not because it's a priority, but we need to make a possible agenda, and it's possible under the current conditions. Before the pandemic, we were not able to fulfill the 2030 agenda because we were not implemented this. We made the political decision to sign the SDGs, but we need to invest. We have to give budgets. That is a problem we have in the public sector. So we have to aim at solving all this. But we think, or at least I personally think, we must prioritize strategic topics and to carry them out in the following years, which are the one that is poverty and the access to the health sector. We must multiply by 5 what we are investing in the health sector, access to water, housing. There are millions of people without a house directly, or also employment, new sectors for employment. The ILO has interesting studies, the same as CEPAL, as regards this topic. Some people mentioned this before. And also education, science, technology, and innovation, but applied and towards development. Digitalization and universal access to internet, productivity, inclusive 4.0 technology, green ecology, green technology, and economic women empowerment. And to finish, and not to say that the SDGs are wrong, the most important as regards relationships is the 17 for us, the number 17. If we don't have allies towards objectives, we won't be able to do it in the macro system, which is what I'm talking about, that is funding to support the new development model, or in a local development. Alone, we're not able to reach development. We must work together with multi-sectoral stakeholders in order to have a bigger impact and to learn together. Thank you very much. Thank you, Maximiliano. Thank you very much for your insights and for your comments as regards the SDGs that later on we need to reflect on together. I give the floor to Emilio Ceballos Vallejos. Thank you. I'm going to share my presentation. Can you see anything on the screen? No. Okay. Thank you, of course, for inviting me. We will talk from Flaxo, Costa Rica. I will talk from my point of view and also from my entrepreneur project. The idea for this presentation is to show you a model that is based on what was going on with the pandemic and what we can do to work on the local development. The presentation is called Innovating from the Base, Technology, Economy, and Territory. Let's start with the basics. How did we get to the COVID-19 situation? First of all, I think everybody, maybe nobody remembers this, the world economy was already in a disacceleration process. They were in the lowest levels, and we will see this later on. And from some countries, including the US and the UK, there was a disfavored discourse as regards globalization. And it's clearly visible in this graph where you see the decreasing tendency of the GDP, especially from 2011 onwards. And we also see that the international commerce started to begin being lost, and that indicates something. That's what I want to revise. And what did we do once COVID was a reality in the world? The answers, the obvious answers that started in the developed countries, which where the COVID started first, was the restriction of mobility. And they had a direct impact towards the economic activity, which implied unemployment, the informality work diminishing. But there were also some interesting things going on. We changed our routines. We developed other activities. In some cases, we stayed more at home without contact. We were more, and something more interesting. We used more solidarity. And in a research we're carrying out, we did some surveys. This is the first one that we did, and it's already processed. We asked about what were the habit changes related to telework. And I think nobody would be surprised that even though everybody or almost everybody from the world said that they saved more time to go to work, in the practice, they end up working more. This is important to mention. People end up working more. And surprisingly, or not surprisingly, people also eat more. People are more stressed. Another important group collaborates more at home. It takes a more active part at home. Some people carry out less sporty activities. Others do more activities. And a young group use this time to study. Other people say they work less. Some other people say they study less and they eat less. But the interesting thing about this is that, at least according to the data collected, there is more tension, more stress, but also more solidarity, more collaboration, and more work. Which were the lessons learned during the pandemics? The first one, and I think it is the most important one, the people who maintain the economy are not professional people or people that are connected to the high technology or scientists. People who maintain economy are people working at supermarkets or in delivery services, public transportation, waste recollection. Those are the people that made the economy survive during this time. And I think it's important to highlight this, but also value this. Another matter that is very important is the technological change. And as you already may know, the telework has arrived to many countries, and it's there to stay, especially in Costa Rica. We started in 2020, or less than 19,000 people doing telework. And today, we have more than 300,000 people doing this type of work. So there is an increase, and this would be the base of something even more interesting. You can see the internet connections in the different countries, and in Latin America, you have the 64%. Of course, we are talking about the more urban areas with more population. Of course, this doesn't happen in more marginalized areas. And we have an interesting variety. And what's best is that in general, there was a significant increase in the internet intervention, especially through the mobile lines, the telephones, the tablets, etc. And we have to take this into account because it is a big development opportunity. Why? Because telework increased in exponential ways in the spaces where it is possible to do telework. The great advantage of this, which is that we can work any place, particularly from any territory. And that has generated and is generating, and we want to continue being generated, market work with people with knowledge, expertise, and in good income, and they can move to territories in which they have connectivity, and they can make themselves sedentary in those places, and they will generate more incomes because there will be more economic activity. And this economic activity will attract more economic activities. But for this to be a reality, we need to improve the connectivity. And what we have always highlighted, the importance of the infrastructure development is really important, the improvement of this, especially when we talk about the digital infrastructure. If we are able to arrive to a more insertion of digitalization, not only in the urban areas, but also in the semi-urban areas, etc., that will give us a big opportunity to attract talent to territories and at the same time to improve the education in the virtual area that many countries have adapted, but it was not as good as regards connectivity. And something else I wanted to highlight, something critical, is to promote what Georgescu Roegen called the bioeconomy. We're talking about a concept that was developed more than 50 years ago. This person is already dead, but he talked about very interesting things that today are even more necessary than ever. To liberate resources, he talked about the war, to improve the quality of life, to foster organic agriculture, to eliminate the waste, especially energy waste, to promote austerity. That means to stop producing in excess, and the products to last longer. He wrote that in 1975, and today it's perhaps clearer than before. What does the bioeconomy mean? You can see this graph from CEPAL. It's an excellent work that is called Bioeconomy in the Caribbean that talks about three important points: to use the biological knowledge, to use the relationships that are done in nature, that are present in nature, and to explain the use of technology, and through that to start developing different scenarios in which we can work with biological basis in productive processes. That is a bioeconomy base. How can we do that? I will provide some pieces of advice, if you will. What happened with the pandemics is there was a recession, unemployment, and the incomes were diminished. But what is never going to stop happening is people eating. the demand on food will never stop. We can start to model what type of food we need to consume. We used to import many types of food, and you see cases of food that are produced in America, that are processed in Europe, and is re-exported to Asia. As an example, that doesn't make so much sense. We must start consuming fresh food from the season or proximity food, what is near the territory. We have lots of food, and this is paradigmatic. We have lots of food that was stopped being consumed because people didn't know what they were used for, or maybe because they prefer to eat a hamburger or a pizza instead of a traditional type of food, which is not something bad. But why should we stop eating products that have a nutritionist approach? And they can also be very healthy and delicious, and they are accessible because they are from the season and they have reasonable prices. But we stopped consuming them, maybe because of historical reasons or changes in the patterns or customs. And something else to highlight is that we should stop buying new things and to repair what we have. That means to come back to a workshop economy. Many of us were able to see when in the past we used to repair shoes, clothes. We didn't eat so much, or we didn't consume so much, and there were not such a resource waste. So what do we do from the local area or sector to promote the fresh food production that are territorial and endemic of the territories? They are accessible and the prices are competitive. To buy less imported products, which doesn't mean just not to buy imported products, but to buy in a more rational way, and especially to buy in the neighborhoods. It means less mobility. And during the pandemic, for example, depending on what country, it could be in the third wave, for example, it implies a safer pattern for consumption. So eating healthy doesn't mean to eat everything, but to eat fresh products, and if possible, to eat local food. That is from the micro way, from the micro. What everybody is trying to do, and not everybody is able to do, to have faster vaccination, to maintain the consumption, since many people are in the informal economy, they don't have so much demand, they cannot go out. So to maintain that consumption using some funds, and also not increasing the public services, especially to help the small companies, or to delay the payments in order to help the small companies. And in practice, that implies reducing the mobility, and at the same time, that people that cannot go out from their house, they can do it with less risk because there are less people outside. And to develop territorial programs of temporary employment to improve school infrastructures, because at some time children will be back, but there is more distance that is needed to improve the health. We can start working on that, developing small infrastructures. And to finish, to wrap up, to foster technology, because through telework, technology has moved the labor market, has generated significant improvements in the market. To foster bioeconomy, to generate new markets with more friendly characteristics towards the environment. These are developed in the territories, and then the national like vaccination and protection measures for workers. I hope I have not spoken so fast. Thank you very much for listening. I think I have made use of the time in a correct way. Thank you very much, Emilio. Let's now move on to the last presentation, to Francisco Alburquerque.
Good afternoon. I've tried to order some of my ideas in relation with the necessity of a transformative agency that is centered among the basic needs of our daily lives. And some of the lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic. So the first question and the first issue is that we need a transformative agenda. It's not enough to refer to recover this normality. What is normal? So the previous economic model is what brought us to this pandemic. So therefore, it's not where we must be aiming to. And on the other hand, this necessity for social inclusion shouldn't be something related with theoretical speeches, but it needs to be transformed into local initiatives based on the recovery for people of the planet and addressing basic needs. That requires social innovations, structural ones, institutional ones, political ones, and also environmental ones. It's not just about technology or Industry 4.0, artificial intelligence, everything that we are starting to talk about now, databases. It's where we are going to and how we are going there, how we are getting there. How we do that? It's with the participation of the people. Barder is a Catalan writer, which sometimes reminds us in his book that it's mayors who should be ruling the world because they are closer to the people. They are the result of a possibility to have a greater popular control. They are involved in public and collective spaces that consecrated public institutions never had. It's also the space for the community, the collective space, and the necessity of common people. We need to reinforce solidarity and social economy, the cooperatives, to re-emerge collective economy. But having more than that makes everything even more unequal. So therefore, we need to work from the bottom up. That's why territorial participative models are essential for this transformative agenda. In the University of Manchester a couple years ago, a group of researchers retook this concept of foundational basic needs of economy, including daily services and infrastructure that is linked to that, which normally had quite a big percentage of the participation of the workforce. I'm referring to the availability of water, energy, clean air, access to housing, protecting ecosystemic goods, protecting biodiversity, also the health education system, nutrition, food, having a public bank of proximity, contributing to telecommunications, and of course, dignifying and paying the invisible work of women of care work in their homes. And then what Barber calls the more local and the more global is what it's everywhere. It's the most essential demand and need that current systems that are supposed to recover, appealing to a new normality, they never address this. They never solve hunger, no poverty, and we continue having these theoretical speeches. we are making a case for territorialization, but not to remove indicators, in my opinion, is to start a local citizenship initiative to defend and promote an agenda based on those purposes and what I call, together with Manchester experts, fundamental activities. Sometimes we say in an exaggerated way, oh, this unprecedented pandemic. Okay, wait. In a magistral class by Pose, there were already some mentions, some allusions to these precedents of the pandemic. I want to highlight from Catali, which was Mitterrand's assessors, spoke about the economy of territories, and also speaking about the pandemic of the Spanish flu in 1918 by Laura Spine and Ginette Spani. I won't go as far, but I will go a little bit closer in the period of neoliberalism, because there's a direct relationship between the practices of policies and neoliberalism and the slow emergence of processes that really hindered biodiversity. In 1981, we have the HIV virus, which affected more than 50 million people at the time, of which 16 million unfortunately die. We had this SARS-CoV-1, which is the precedent of the SARS-CoV-2 for 2019 viruses. Then we had in 2009 the influenza virus, the H1N1 virus, which in a CIA report said that was a virus-generated respiratory disease that had no adequate treatment and could unchain a terrible pandemic, especially in highly dense populations. So there were precedents and there were previous activities that were calling everyone's attention. No one paid attention to this. History moved forward. And in 2014, there was the Ebola virus. But of course, it was Africa. Let them take care of it. In 2015, of course, the virus had precedents. It's not the case that we had such a lack of ability to address this before. And the lack of the poor provision of health systems have a clear guilty actor, which is neoliberal policy. So we need a terrible and a taxative and great change of these actions. The real vaccine is not sanitary. What needs to be changed is the system, including this change of paradigm. And the progress of economic globalization, the praise of big value change, leaves aside the need of sovereignty and local economies. Of course, we won't mythify once more the achievement of great exports as if it were just the one aim of local economic development activities. Because we still need to dignify collective communities. This is what also affected the loss of biodiversity. We provided services for different ecosystems. And of course, at the time we thought we didn't need to pay attention to that. Still, some universities are moving and advancing with this poor intellectual capacity. This is not taken care of, and at the same time, these ecosystemic services are not being taken care of. Climate change is actually about reducing the end of the pipeline. We don't need to have as many emissions. But this is not the only thing to take care of. We need to start from the basis, changing the energetic model. Taking these last years where we had the chance to change the model, but we didn't. So it's important to see that we need to have a state addressing only losses. No, we needed to sometimes guide us in the need to recover a little bit the teachings and the lessons learned throughout history and rationality. This is not only a public and private sector matter, it's also about collective and individual aspects. The recovery of informal economy for common people, for collective spaces, driven by the bottom line in each community, which is not something either private nor public. It's a collective space that it's still fighting. However, all these measures before the pandemic had some bias from the centralized government, from the central government. We need to be very clear about this. Stop talking nonsense and start very strong initiatives, fighting from territories to recover the transformative agenda, the transformation agenda, because otherwise we will go into just a recovery of normality. Artificial intelligence, moving faster, it's not the solution, but a solidarity and collective mindset which can help us. It's also necessary to highlight that investment in health is one of the most fundamental needs. It's an investment for the future. It's not just public expense that needs to be cut. And if there's any public expense to be cut, then that should be military expenses or other speculative financial activities that affects and that has to do with the transactional financial market. We need a political action driven by institutions that sometimes we say, oh, this has three pillars, the economical, the social, and environmental aspects. No. Anyone who worked on the ground knows that this has an institutional aspect, political and also cultural aspect, which means that we need to transform theoretical ideas into local cultural actions with a transformation agenda centralized along green issues, and also trying to stop that the daily scene is permeated by the interests of financial sectors, which are not every time in coherence with social, economic, and institutional needs. Thank you very much. Very good. Thank you very much, Francisco. We have had 5 interesting presentations with a lot of content, with practical experiences and elements for reflection. Marcelo told us about an important experience in Chile with indigenous populations who are the poorest people and low-scale culture, and their need for technical assistance and infrastructure, investment, work, water. In terms of the articulation of production with social innovation, even with, we also spoke about dialogue financial policy and technical assistance and training as well. Then Javier spoke about circular economy in the Sierra de Cádiz, which is a very interesting experience in a very beautiful region, and one of the most important topics of today's life, which is the correct management of residue and waste through new ways and new ways to transport and classify these materials. It's a topic that enters in dialogues with different environmental, cultural, and economical issues, the topic of green employment as an inspiring subject. Then Maximiliano spoke about the challenges for new development models in the new framework of financing, the new system for financing that we know that this topic is very important to re-emerge and to strengthen the different real experiences and practical experiences that we are trying to learn about right here. We were really surprised by how much money is targeted to Central America in order to improve infrastructure that is so much needed to improve local economic development. Also, the work of coordination and having structured communication to improve this model, which I also thought was very interesting. Also, there was a very important connection with the SDGs and the difficulty to implement this, even especially after the pandemic and after the social consequences, the economic consequences that we had in our countries and in our territories. And thus, these priorities topics are extreme poverty, food insecurity, water, housing, employments in new sectors, and also the sanitary issues and health issues. So we need to look at digitalization, inclusive productivity, gender issues and empowerment, etc., and so on. Then Francisco brought us a reflection about technology and the territory, bringing some context of even before COVID-19 and the topic of the economical deacceleration at global level and also the structural crisis that we are in right now. And as regards the pandemic, the need to improve connectivity in territories and improve the infrastructure and quality of education while promoting bioeconomy. And also within this topic in important sectors such as food and development of small infrastructure and technology. Afterwards, Francisco Albuquerque talk about the need to have a transformation agenda, not only in terms of theoretical terms, but also in practical terms. Organizations. And therefore, it is necessary to have social inclusion out of theoretical mindsets and going for social innovation. This was also very interesting, and in this forum, it was also very interesting to see how we could make emphasis on the role of local governments and governments of the world. And from there, it was also very important to see the different approaches of territorial development from bottom to top, seeing where most needs are. And also making a connection with the 2030 agenda and the need to territorialize decisions through strengthening ecosystems and institutional policies that are stronger and that are so much needed. So we saw the different experiences and such interesting elements in order to also answer a question from Anita from the ILO. We have also some conceptual and theoretical aspects to think about the South-to-South cooperation and also triangular cooperation. We have the experience of Chile, Spain, and we also know that in our region we have some very important experiences to speak about South-to-South and triangular cooperation. I had a presentation prepared that was more important, but given the time and the questions that we have, I will move on with the questions and try to pose them in order to reflect in a collective manner. So in the chat, I found the importance of discussing structural differences in thinking about the well-being of indigenous populations. So in the process of transfer of ownership of land and governance, what is the main points of these initiatives? I thought it was very important to see about the initiative of Sierra de Cádiz, and it was so very nice to see how adequately waste is managed. So I wanted to see how you identify every citizen to find their specific rate to be charged. Then for Maximiliano, how do you think that the role of other banks can be, such as development banks, in order to promote initiatives, innovative and inclusive strategies for local economic development? So I have also tried to work in this issue in the South-to-South cooperation, right? Here we have a lot of items to see and analyze. And the last one for this block is there are some times that are targeted to some specific speakers and others to everyone else. Thinking about the practice of local economic development in the new reality, how can we link innovation and social inclusion in different ecosystems, landscapes, and green economy initiatives? I think we can answer, if you want, in this order, as speakers, in the same order as speakers took the floor before. Please.
Love me. I would like to speak. First of all, as the question, we don't have a solution for the original places in Chile, the debt that we have, the state has. And every day this gets increased in our country. The Chilean has an historic debt with 8 original towns. I think we should recognize our originary populations. They were before the state from Chile arrived. So we must recognize that they have a language, they have traditions, customs, a culture, they have authorities, ancestral authorities. So Chile should recognize that. As regards the Corporation of the Indigenous Development is an organization from the state. It's not from the original native group. This corporation, through the treaty has generated one of the highest demands that our native people have as regards politics, that is the ownership of the land. They belong that the land was taken by the state, and that is established by the indigenous law in Chile. And it is a gradual process of giving them back the land. In Araucanía, more than 19,300 approximately people have recovered their lands in this development indigenous corporation represented by the state. Of course, there are advisors that represent the indigenous places, whose investment in Araucanía region is more than 725 million US dollars. So the land is provided, but they don't get enough fuel to develop themselves. So the poorest are the native groups, and they should be receiving the state and the regional government support. Today, in Chile, the private sector in the central part of our country is a second income that the country receives as regards the productive sector that has to do with the fruit exportation. Today is a very important exportation point in agriculture. Through this pilot plan that we're working on together with the native groups is to generate a population group with the indigenous peoples, with cooperatives, and also the ones called Mapuche, with the financing autonomy, with state funding, so that they can develop in their own territories and implement this program. Thank you. Thank you, Marcelo. Javier? Okay, regarding the differentiated taxes, for example, in our door-by-door system, since we know what each house does as regards the waste management, that allows us to know the fraction and to act on that. So there are different types of possibilities, and we're working on them. That is to penalize when there is a lot of waste, and to provide funds when people recycle, whether it is carton, paper. And we have different actions. Whether we're thinking about whether to penalize or to provide money to people that recycle. We will know what the users do as regards their waste management. And in Spain and in some zones there, we have this type of taxes, and we're working on this. And as regards the economic activity, which is social and solidarity action, for example, with electronic devices, thinking about the restoration, the reusage of this, we're working with associations. We are redoing furnitures, and also a market that is possible for this furniture. And we also want to highlight the recollection of used clothes. And we are creating some work positions for the people that are at risk of being excluded socially. All the global project is going to create in the place like approximately 50 new jobs. We are going to administer on these types of wastes with separation and the treatment as regards organic waste. We use this as a resource, the waste management. Okay, Maximiliano. As regards the question, I think it is connected to Francisco said. The role of any organization has to do with how we make decisions. It has to do with governance. If it is separated from a bank or an institution or the politics in themselves, the person that is going to be impacted or benefited, it will have a higher gap. So in some way, we must introduce in the decision-making, in the governance of the international bodies, what is going on in the territory. I give you an example. The international banks or the development banks, they are not private banks. The development banks in particular has a direct relationship with their owners. The owners are the countries. So what do? I represent the country's interest, in this case Argentina, in the bank, And I have an idea of what the priorities of my country are, or I should know what they are, so we can manage and promote all those priorities in the bank to receive the funds and to help the provinces, the cities, and even the private sector that needs this. But until we don't include a more direct relationship to know what is going on, not like an officer, public officer, not knowing, but to have a more direct relationship with the territory and to include this in the decision-making in that framework, the international bodies will not be associated. And this has been going on for 30 years. There's a big problem. I criticize this. I am from the social, military. Even though I was trained at Oxford, I studied an UNG because people from my neighborhood they really needed to eat. And that has to be taken to the international bodies. We have to see how this impacts in our decision-making in the territory. It's very complicated for international bodies to know how something is impacted in a neighborhood. So what we must do, or at least that's what I'm trying to promote in the bank, is to see how this is impacting, to give a voice to the people that need to be heard, even though all of us should be heard, but the people who really need it. And from that, to work in a more social way. Our banks are banks for the development, but we must start modifying the development concepts. Development, sorry that I take more time. It's very complex to talk about this without explaining things. The development has changed toward things that they shouldn't have changed. So we are talking about sustainability, the environment. We're talking about that because we have made a mess out of this. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about this. We'd be talking about how wonderful we are, and we are not. We had made a mess out of it. So what we must do is, first of all, ask ourselves, why are we talking about this? And we have done this ourselves. We are working as I have been working here for 1 year. I can tell you about my experience and other directors from other banks. We talked to all the Argentinian sectors that feel vulnerable. For example, in my case, that they have a problem. Unfortunately, we are in a pandemic, but this provides me the possibility to talk to people from neighborhoods that maybe were not able to talk to people that make decisions of millions of dollars that are going to impact the country. But that is what we must do. We have to have a more close reality. I totally agree with Francisco to what you said. I really agree with you. We must have a more close reality, more articulated. We are all not articulated with the pandemics and with other historical antecedents. I mentioned 3 things. We react. We are always reacting towards problems. We are not proactive. We always react when we have the problem, and we don't structure something in the long term, and we don't complement each other. So I think this methodology part, we have to take it to the bank and to all the institutions, from the government, associative places, and so on. As regards the impact in these topics, we are working on this, and in fact, we are providing funds in Argentina for we are providing funds regarding these topics. Thank you very much. We don't have so much left. Emilio and Francisco, if you want to add something, you have 30 seconds, 1 minute to talk if you want. Very fast, something very punctual about the questions. Emilio? You're right, Maximiliano. We have confused development with the economical development of the exportation. And for this reason, it's not enough to say, what if we export fruit? So in order to get development, what is that? It's a contradiction. We have to think about this in a better way. Why don't we directly arrive to development and define that it means the fundamental needs of people in their daily lives? That is a different way of working. And the South-South cooperation, it can be converted into a community corporation, social communities, municipalities, local projects. That is, it will be something different. That's what we should be aiming at. Otherwise, we go towards the same side, towards the same result. Some people, this model is so miserable. People from intermediate countries are still in confinement. They don't have vaccines. This is the normality. Is this a normality? Come on. Maximiliano is right. We have confused the development. This is not development, and this is not exportation improvement. It's not equality, economic development. It's dignity and people's autonomy to be able to be people in a planet that could be lived on, that we have charged this on ours. We have to build something. We have to be more critical and more proactive, less words, more practice, more local actions from the municipalities, to take them, to empower ourselves from the closest and being concrete with a transformation agenda based on the fundamental necessities or essential necessities. Thank you very much. Okay, very briefly. Effectively, to grow is not to develop. And what we must do is to start thinking about people. The economy objective is something that sometimes we don't take into account. We have to improve the quality, welfare of people. And that's the last thing we think when we think about economy. We talk about the improvement, exportation, the growth, the diversification in the productive area. But we must start talking in the past and see what is going on in our territories and take advantage of the opportunities that can be generated there. The South-South cooperation starts with that, with shorten the commerce conditions. It doesn't make sense to produce some goods that is going to be reproduced in another country so that the third country is going to consume. That doesn't make sense. We must start producing and consume in a more regional way. It doesn't mean that there shouldn't exist commerce, but we have to rethink about this. Thank you. Thank you very much. We will say more. We would have more insights and questions. But I think with the talks and the insights from the speakers, we can have an idea of what we need, that we need to strengthen the social and solidarity economy, cooperation, South-South cooperation, and also a more linked economy to justice, life, and equity. I think we can finish this session. It's been a pleasure. I felt really well being a moderator. I have learned a lot from the insights and the practical cases and the elements to think up towards more actions and less words, as Francisco said. Thank you very much again to all the organizers, especially to the ILO, for the invitation and also for trusting and giving us the opportunity. And I hope we can be in contact and to reflect on this and to have more to talk about in the future. Greetings to all of you and good health for everybody.